When a white van prowled the shadows of the parking garage, Nathan Cole realized his billion-dollar empire meant nothing compared to the terrified child hiding in his back seat. The air in the parking garage carried that damp, metallic scent of oil and concrete, the kind that clung to the lungs. Nathan Cole stepped off the private elevator and adjusted his tie as if armor could be fastened with silk. The echo of his Italian shoes beat across the vast emptiness, each step ricocheting off pillars and polished cars. A 3-hour boardroom war still throbbed in his temples. Profit projections, merger demands, voices of men who thought money was a kingdom's only currency. He'd won the battle but walked away hollow, craving silence. His Mercedes waited under a humming fluorescent light, sleek and black, flawless as his reputation. Nathan clicked the fob and the headlights blinked once, a loyal servant acknowledging its master. He reached for the handle, savoring the small pleasure of driving himself for once. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Light, quick. Not the heavy stride of another executive, but something smaller. He turned sharply. Nothing moved, just endless rows of steel and chrome, shadows knifing between support columns. He told himself it was an echo. Still, his hand lingered near his phone. He could summon security with a single press. He slid into the driver's seat, the leather swallowing him in familiarity. The door had barely shut before movement flared in his peripheral vision. The opposite rear door eased open with a whisper, and a small figure slid inside, swift and practiced. Nathan froze. His body cataloged exits, emergency stairwell to the left, ramp 30 yards behind, security booth at the far end, but the guard was probably already gone for the weekend. Before he could decide whether to confront or call, a tiny hand shot forward and clamped over his nose. Shut up, a child's voice hissed, sharp with terror. They'll hear us. Nathan's first instinct was to wrench her away, but then his eyes locked on hers, wide, dark, trembling with an urgency no game could imitate. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her hair was braided but unraveling, her shirt torn, her knees raw with blood, bare feet pressed into the leather seat, leaving smears of dirt and tar. The smell of sweat, iron, and fear enveloped him. The words weren't a child's whim, they were survival. An engine growled, heavy, predatory, rolling low through the garage. Not the sleek purr of luxury, something bigger. Nathan twisted slightly, her hand still on his face, and saw it. A white van crept down the aisle, unmarked, tinted windows glinting under fluorescent glare. It prowled like a hunter, pausing at each parked car as though sniffing for prey. The girl went rigid. Every muscle in her small body tightened, breath caught in her throat. Nathan felt her pulse racing through her palm, beating against his jaw. The van drew closer, headlights washing over the polished hood of his Mercedes. The driver leaned forward, thick neck, baseball cap, scanning with predatory patience. Nathan's mind screamed to act, call security, step out, take control. That was what he did. Controlled boardrooms, markets, empires. But something deep and unhealed, something from his own boyhood in foster homes and sleepless nights, pulled him still. He knew the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in mirrors long ago, a child bracing for abandonment. The van idled behind them. 10 seconds stretched into eternity, heartbeat against heartbeat. Then slowly, it moved on, turning down another row, disappearing into the shadows. The girl's hand slipped away, leaving a dusty print on his jaw. Her breathing rattled in the quiet, too shallow, too fast. She stayed hunched low, eyes darting like prey, not convinced the predator was gone. Nathan stared at her through the rearview mirror. A stranger, a child, a warning his carefully constructed world had no defense against. His thumb brushed the edge of his phone, security number glowing ready on the screen. One call, and this stopped being his problem. But his fingers hesitated. He knew what the men in the van would do if they found her. He knew what it felt like to be unseen, unheard, discarded. And for the first time in years, Nathan Cole, the man who could bend markets with a signature, decided not to act like a CEO. He simply turned the key, kept the lights off, and drove. The girl whispered from the shadows, "Don't stop, please." And Nathan realized he had just crossed a line he could never uncross. The city bled orange and violet as the October sun sagged low on the horizon, its reflection smearing across the Pacific like molten glass. Nathan Cole's Mercedes glided along the coastal highway, the hum of the engine steady, unremarkable, everything he hoped to project. But inside, the car felt like a live wire. In the rearview mirror, a pair of wide, watchful eyes darted from window to window, always checking, always bracing. The little girl remained low on the seat, her body curled into itself as if trying to disappear into the leather. Nathan's fingers gripped the wheel harder than they should have. For years, his life had been measured in risk ratios, boardroom votes, quarterly margins. Nothing about this fit into a spreadsheet. He wanted to ask 100 questions, wanted to call security, the police, the FBI, but every time his hand hovered near the phone, the girl stiffened, her breathing fracturing into short, sharp bursts. "What's your name?" He tried again, his voice low, even. The girl's head shook violently. "Can't. Not yet." He nodded, forcing calm into his tone. "Okay, but can you tell me where I should take you? Police? Hospital?" Her response was instant, panicked. "No police, no hospital. They'll find us. They'll find Eli." The name hit him like a stone. Eli. Whoever he was the anchor tethering this child to danger. "Who's Eli?" Nathan asked carefully. "My brother." The word came out cracked, jagged, as if it carried more weight than her small frame could bear. "They still have him. If they know you're helping me, they'll hurt him. They'll hurt him worse." The car rolled through a red light, and Nathan's chest tightened as a white van pulled up 2 lanes over. Maybe the same one, maybe not. The girl slid down onto the floorboard instantly, her arms wrapping around her knees. "They saw me before. They'll see me again." Nathan's mind churned, every executive instinct screaming that this was a liability, a trap, maybe even a setup. But then he caught her reflection in the glass. This wasn't a liar. This wasn't a child playing games. The terror stamped into her bones was something real, something no child should know. "How long have they had your brother?" he asked softly, eyes on the road. 2 days, maybe 3. Time. It gets weird in the dark. Her voice broke on the word dark, and she swallowed hard before continuing. "I got out through a vent. Eli couldn't. He made me go. He made me promise." The promise, he realized, was the only thing keeping her moving. A promise made by a brother who had likely endured beatings to protect her. Nathan's jaw clenched. The billionaire who spent his life building walls of glass and steel now found himself staring into the abyss of a child's world, where the monsters weren't metaphors, they were men. "Where were they keeping you?" he asked. "Dark, smelled like fish and rust, dogs barking all the time." Her voice fell to a whisper. "And other kids. I don't know how many. They kept us apart, but they were going to move us. Tonight. Eli said tonight they'd move everyone." Nathan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Move them. That meant transport. That meant disappearance. That meant children vanishing into a world where money bought silence and bodies. The thought chilled him more than the Pacific breeze that whistled faintly through the vents. The girl, Ava, though she hadn't said it yet, leaned forward, her eyes fierce despite the tremor in her small hands. "You don't understand. These aren't just bad men. They have friends everywhere. Eli heard them, even the police. That's why you can't call. If you call, they'll know. And then Eli." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her forehead against her knees, fighting tears she refused to let fall. Nathan forced his breathing steady. His life had been a fortress of logic, of hard decisions made without hesitation. But this wasn't a decision about stockholders or acquisitions. This was a child, broken but unyielding, telling him the system itself was corrupted. The van in the next lane turned away, but the tension remained. Nathan's mind calculated scenarios, escape routes, strategies, but none of them added up cleanly. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO steering an empire. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a choice that would define the rest of his life. The girl's voice came again, small but steady. "Please, just drive. Away. Anywhere. Just don't let them find me." Nathan swallowed, his chest tightening with something he hadn't felt in decades. Recognition. He knew that plea. He'd whispered it once, long ago, when foster homes had turned cold and uncaring, and someone had chosen not to listen. He wouldn't repeat their mistake. He pressed harder on the gas, the Mercedes surging forward into the falling night. The city lights stretched ahead, neon veins of life. But Nathan knew they weren't just lights anymore. They were hiding places, checkpoints, traps. And somewhere, Eli, a boy not much older than the terrified girl in his back seat, was waiting for her promise to be kept. Nathan Cole had made billions on promises written in ink. But this was a promise written in blood and fear. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he had enough power to keep it. The safe house looked ordinary from the street, a modest 2-story buried in the sprawl of suburban sameness. To Nathan, who lived among glass towers and cliffside mansions, it felt like stepping onto another planet. Lucas killed the headlights before they rolled into the garage, shutting the door behind them in a silence thick with unspoken urgency. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Furniture was sparse, chosen not for comfort but for utility. Nathan ushered the girl in, careful not to touch her unless she chose to reach for him. She didn't. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood as her eyes darted across every corner, cataloging exits, noting windows. He recognized the behavior. She wasn't safe yet. She was measuring whether this cage was kinder than the last. Lucas had already transformed the dining room into a war room. Laptops opened to satellite imagery, scrolling lists of names, red dots clustered along the waterfront. The glow of the screens lit his face in sharp, tactical focus. 8 kids gone in 3 months, he said without looking up. No Amber Alerts, no police bulletins. Someone's keeping this quiet. The girl crept forward, her small frame half swallowed by the hoodie Lucas had found in a box of spare clothes. She studied the map with unnerving precision. Her finger tapped a cluster near the docks. There, that's where they kept us. Blue containers, dogs nearby. Lucas raised a brow, finally taking her measure. You sure? Her chin lifted, defiance sparking in her tired eyes. I lived there, I know. Nathan felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. She was 7 years old and spoke like a soldier returning from war. He eased into a chair beside her, leaning forward. Can you show us? She hesitated, then pulled a pencil from the table. On the back of a financial projection sheet Nathan had tossed aside earlier, she began to sketch. Her hand trembled slightly, but her lines were deliberate. A rectangular building, a hallway, squares for rooms. She marked an X near the corner. That's where they put us. I got out through here. Vent was loose. Eli worked on it for hours. Her breath hitched on his name. She kept drawing. This room had crying, little ones younger than me, and here, office. The man with the snake tattoo. She shaded it dark, pressing harder until the pencil threatened to snap. He had a clipboard. Names, prices. Nathan's stomach knotted. Prices. He thought of balance sheets and profit margins, numbers that had once defined his worth. Here, they defined children. He forced his jaw steady, though rage burned like acid in his chest. Lucas leaned closer to the map. If what she's saying is true, this isn't just a stash house. It's an operational hub. Organized. Documented. His voice hardened. Trafficking. The word felt like a gunshot in the quiet house. Ava flinched, her pencil clattering from her fingers. Nathan reached out instinctively, stopping just short of her hand. She looked at him, wary, then surprised by the softness in his tone. You don't have to draw anymore if you don't want to. You've already done more than anyone should ask. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't cry. She straightened, pulled the paper closer, and whispered. Eli said if one of us got out, we had to remember everything. So I remember. Nathan felt something shift inside him. He'd built an empire by remembering details, by weaponizing information. But this child, her memory wasn't ambition, it was survival. And now, it was the key to saving others. Lucas flipped to another screen, pulling up thermal imaging of the docks. The warehouse she'd sketched glowed faintly, pulses of heat betraying life within. She's right, activity, multiple signatures. He swore under his breath. They're getting ready for a move. If they relocate those kids, we lose them. Ava's head snapped up. Tonight. That's what they said. Tonight. The room went still. Nathan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't a soldier, but for the first time in years he felt the same surge he'd felt in his early days, standing on the edge of a deal that could change everything. Except this time, the stakes weren't stocks or mergers, they were children's lives. Lucas looked at him. If we act without backup and she's wrong, we walk into a hornet's nest. If we wait for the FBI, they'll be gone. Nathan saw the girl staring at him, waiting. She wasn't asking him to be a billionaire. She was asking him to be human. He leaned back, decision coiling in his chest like steel. We're not waiting. The girl's lips parted, a flicker of relief breaking through her hardened mask. For the first time, Nathan saw the child beneath the survivor. Lucas exhaled, already pulling up encrypted channels, calling in his most trusted men. Then we do this smart. Quiet. Evidence first, then extraction. The house thrummed with urgency. Screens refreshed, maps updated, weapons checked. But Nathan remained focused on the girl. She had drawn a battlefield on the back of his company's profit sheet, and he knew with brutal clarity, if he failed here, nothing he had ever built would matter. The night outside deepened, shadows thickening along the coast. Somewhere, Eli and others waited in the dark, unaware rescue might already be coming. And in a quiet suburban house, a billionaire and a barefoot child sat side by side, united by a promise neither could afford to break. Fog rolled in heavy and low over the waterfront, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred distance until the world seemed reduced to shadows and whispers. Pier 47 jutted into the black water like the arm of some sleeping beast, rusted cranes looming against the moonlight, chains clinking softly where they hung. Nathan Cole crouched low beside a stack of salt-stained crates, the chill biting through his tailored clothes, reminding him how far he had strayed from boardrooms and mahogany tables. Beside him, Lucas moved like a shadow, his presence steady, grounded, unshakable. And just behind them, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, Ava peered out with eyes too fierce for her 7 years. The trawler rocked against the pier, its hull scarred from years of hard seas. From Nathan's vantage, it looked less like a fishing boat and more like a prison drifting on chains. 2 guards paced the deck with rifles slung loose, bored but dangerous. The hum of a generator filled the silence, punctuated by the occasional bark of dogs caged near the pier. And through the green lens of Lucas's night vision, faint shapes could be seen being moved below deck. Small, slow-moving, terrified. Nathan's chest tightened at the sight. He told himself he was ready, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. Children corralled like contraband, shuffled along as if they were boxes to be shipped. He felt his throat constrict. For once in his life, there was no deal to negotiate, no numbers to soften the edge. This was raw, ugly, evil. Lucas tapped his wristwatch, a silent cue. Alarms erupted across the pier a moment later, blaring sirens, strobing lights, sprinklers spewing arcs of water. A diversion engineered by his men at the far end of the docks. Chaos bloomed like fire. The guards shouted, one running down the gangplank, the other bolting for the bridge to call in reinforcements. Nathan didn't hesitate. He and Lucas sprinted for the side of the trawler, Ava gripping his sleeve until the last second before he lifted her into the shadows of the skiff they'd tethered. Her whisper followed him into the cold water. Find Eli. The maintenance hatch on the port side was exactly where Ava had said it would be. Unlocked, neglected, a secret door for anyone desperate enough to crawl through it. They slipped inside, moving through narrow corridors that smelled of diesel and rot. Somewhere ahead came the sound of children crying, muffled, fragile. Nathan peered around a corner and froze. A guard sat slouched on a chair outside a steel door, his rifle propped lazily across his lap. Lucas ghosted forward, silent as fog, and in an instant the man was down, his airway cut off by an arm like iron. The rifle clattered softly to the floor. Lucas pocketed the keys from the man's belt and pressed them into Nathan's hand. It felt surreal, this billionaire whose pen once commanded billions of dollars now standing in a filthy corridor with a ring of stolen keys, trembling not with fear, but with urgency. He unlocked the steel door. The air that rushed out hit him like a wave, unwashed bodies, fear, despair. Inside, 12 children huddled together, eyes wide, faces streaked with dirt. And among them, taller than the rest, bruised but upright, was Eli. His face was swollen, one eye nearly closed, but when he saw the man who opened the door, his first word was not a plea, but a name. Ava. Nathan's throat tightened. He knelt, his voice urgent but gentle. She's safe. She sent me. The boy's jaw quivered, but he didn't break. He stepped forward, steadying a smaller child with him. We have to move. They'll come back. Lucas urged them out, guiding with calm precision, but Nathan's mind raced. 12 children. Barely half could even walk without help. They weren't going to swim to safety. Not in this cold, not under fire. We take the boat, Nathan said, the words tasting reckless but inevitable. Lucas snapped his head around. This tub, with no crew, it's suicide. Unexpected, Nathan countered. They won't anticipate it. By the time they regroup, we'll already be gone. The children shuffled, guided by whispers and gentle hands, up toward the deck. Nathan lifted one girl who clung to a battered teddy bear, her grip so fierce he thought her fingers might break. Another boy limped, leaning against Eli, who bore the weight without. Complaint. Gunfire cracked above. The guard had returned, shouting. Nathan surged forward, adrenaline snapping through him, and grabbed the first object he saw, a fire extinguisher. The man turned just in time to take the full force of it across his chest, slamming into the railing with a grunt before dropping unconscious. Nathan's hands shook from the impact, but his mind was steel. Lucas hauled the unconscious body aside, already barking orders. Kids to the cabin, now! Nathan sprinted to the bridge, the wheelhouse glowing faintly. He gripped the controls, memory flashing of yacht lessons years ago, long forgotten but suddenly vital. He shoved the throttle forward. The trawler lurched, engines roaring, lines straining as it broke from the dock. Shouts erupted on shore. The dogs barked frantically. Then a spotlight seared across the water. A speedboat. Sleek, fast, armed. Figures moved aboard, rifles glinting under the moonlight. "They'll catch us," Lucas said flatly, leveling a stolen rifle at the speedboat. Nathan's grip on the wheel tightened, his voice calm despite the storm inside. "Then we buy time. We just need time." The trawler groaned against the waves, sluggish but moving, carrying its stolen cargo of children toward uncertain salvation. Behind them, the speedboat closed in, its engine a predator's snarl, and Nathan Cole, billionaire empire builder, suddenly found himself captain of a ship of the damned, barreling headlong into a war he never knew he'd fight, but one he could no longer afford to lose. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold-trimmed drapes, every detail screaming wealth and old power. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter rippled like a rehearsed chorus, and cameras flashed in bursts of artificial lightning as the city's elite paraded through the Harbor Foundation gala. Nathan Cole adjusted the knot of his bow tie, each movement deliberate, concealing the storm that boiled beneath his polished exterior. Tonight wasn't about mergers or charity auctions. Tonight was war. Across the room, Veronica Ames stood near the bar, perfectly cast in the role of the disgraced CFO, nervous, isolated, avoiding eye contact with colleagues who whispered behind their hands. She caught Nathan's gaze just long enough to confirm what he already knew. The trap was set. Then the air shifted, as though the chandeliers themselves trembled in recognition of evil. Vincent Hale entered. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, his tailored navy blazer crisp, his smile confident enough to disarm anyone who hadn't seen the darkness behind it. Cameras surged forward, snapping, flashing, desperate to capture the return of the billionaire who claimed he'd been framed. Flanked by 3 lawyers and 2 bodyguards, Hale looked less like a fugitive and more like a conqueror, reclaiming his throne. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice rich, commanding, "I've come tonight to clear my name." The crowd split, some eager to hear him, others shrinking back, but no one dared leave. Power drew people like moths, even when it burned. Hale shook hands, clapped shoulders, passed out prepared statements his lawyers had printed on thick linen paper. He spun lies with ease, painting Nathan as the villain, a rival who'd engineered a smear campaign, a billionaire so desperate for shipping routes he'd fabricated stories using a troubled child. Nathan listened from the edge of the crowd, jaw clenched, forcing himself to wait. Veronica's bracelet camera was transmitting every word, but Hale hadn't slipped yet. His mask was too well polished. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Nathan saw movement at the rear doors. His heart stumbled. Ava. She wasn't supposed to be inside. She was supposed to stay with her mother outside, among the protesters holding signs with children's faces and names. But here she was, shoulders squared, her small hand gripping her mother's. Isla's face was taut with fear, but her daughter's was fire. The room stilled when Ava's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You're lying." Every head turned. Nathan's blood went cold. Hale froze just for a fraction of a second, but that sliver of hesitation cracked his mask. He tried to recover, forcing a smile. "Who let this child in here? Security?" "I was in your warehouse." Ava's voice was clear, sharp, carrying farther than seemed possible for her size. "In the room with the steel door. You came once. You looked at us like animals. You pointed at me and said I'd fetch a good price because I was young and pretty." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swiveled, lenses zooming, hungry for the story unraveling before them. Hale's lawyers whispered frantically, but the girl pressed on. "You have a scar," Ava said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her small hands. "On your left hand, from the dog that bit you when you kicked Eli." She paused, her eyes burning into him. "You told the snake man to break my brother's arm if he caused more trouble." Hale's jaw tightened. He raised a hand as if to silence her, but the damage was done. The crowd's silence was deafening, the weight of disbelief shifting. Veronica seized the moment, stepping forward, her voice trembling just enough to sell the lie. "Vincent, please, let me help you. They forced me to betray you, but I know where the real records are, the ones the FBI hasn't found." Hale's eyes narrowed, suspicion battling with ego. He leaned closer. The microphone in her bracelet caught every word. "You always were the smart one," he murmured. "And you're right, the Cambodia shipment is clean. 20 units at $50,000 each. That's $1 million foundation the FBI will never touch." Veronica pressed. "Units? You mean children?" "Of course," Hale said, almost proudly. "What else would they be paying for? Rural villages where no one questions missing faces, buyers who pay premiums for American documents I provide. My masterpiece. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, screams, shouts. Reporters shoved microphones forward, cameras flashing like gunfire. And Nathan, who had been waiting for this precise moment, stepped onto the stage. His phone was raised, its screen glowing live. "Smile, Vincent," he said, his voice calm, steady. "You're confessing to 50,000 people watching right now." Hale's face drained of color. He lunged, but his own bodyguards held him back, understanding what an attack would look like on camera. FBI agents materialized from the crowd, badges flashing. "Vincent Hale," Special Agent Sarah Chun's voice cut through the chaos, hard and unyielding. "You're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and money laundering." The cuffs clicked around his wrists as the room broke into pandemonium. Some guests fled, others shouted, a few cried, but Ava stood tall, watching as the man who had terrorized her was dragged past. Hale snarled something ugly under his breath, but she didn't flinch. "You didn't win," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We did." For the first time, Vincent Hale had no smile left. Nathan looked out at the sea of flashing cameras, at Ava's small frame silhouetted against the blinding light, and felt the weight of his empire shift. Tonight, power had changed hands, not in a boardroom, not in a stock ersatz, hangy, but in the voice of a child who refused to be silenced. The night cracked open into a gray, restless dawn, the kind that draped the city in a sheet of damp fog, hiding sins until the sun burned them into the light. Nathan Cole stood at the edge of the docks, the salt air thick on his tongue, his tuxedo jacket from the gala still hanging on his shoulders like armor that had lost its shine. Around him, FBI SUVs idled in tight formation, red and blue lights muted by mist. Agents moved with urgency, voices sharp, boots echoing against steel and asphalt. The world believed the war was over after Vincent Hale's televised arrest. Nathan knew better. Deputy Commissioner Patricia Brandt, her hair unkempt, ankle monitor blinking defiantly, leaned against a bureau vehicle, flanked by two agents who looked ready to drag her away at the first twitch. Her voice, though hoarse, carried like a gunshot. "You don't have time for paperwork. Hale's Cambodia shipment isn't some future fantasy. It's happening now. 20 kids. Container 48, North Dock. Guarded by cops who don't even know what they're guarding." Agent Sarah Chun's jaw flexed. "You expect us to trust you after years of bribes and cover-ups?" Brandt's eyes burned with something raw, something almost human. "You think I don't know I'm damned? But I'm telling you the truth. I'm done protecting that bastard. Let me do one right thing before I rot in prison." Nathan watched, silent, his mind sharpening with every detail. He didn't care about Brandt's redemption. He cared about what was locked behind corrugated steel doors and whether Eli's promise to Ava, that they'd be together again, would hold. The convoy moved, engines low, weaving through the labyrinth of stacked containers. Dawn painted the harbor in dull pewter, cranes looming like sentinels above a battlefield. Container 48 sat in the restricted zone, two police crew. Sirs parked nearby. The officers stepped forward, confusion painted across their faces. "This is a federal transport," one insisted, his hand hovering near his holster. "We were told to protect it." Chun's badge snapped open like a blade. "You were lied to. Step back." The men hesitated, and in their hesitation Nathan saw realization dawning, the horror of unwitting complicity. They lowered their hands. Lucas moved fast, bolt cutters biting through the heavy lock. The door groaned as it opened, metal shrieking like a cry from the belly of hell, and then the stench hit. Mildew, sweat, fear. Inside, 20 children huddled together in a steel coffin. Some sat in silence, their eyes hollow. Others whimpered, clutching each other like driftwood in a storm. One boy, no more than 6, held a teddy bear so tattered it looked ready to dissolve. A girl who couldn't be older than 8 rocked a toddler in her arms, whispering a lullaby off-key, her voice breaking with exhaustion. Nathan's knees nearly gave out. He had seen greed, corruption, betrayal, but never this. Never lives reduced so brutally to inventory. The youngest child flinched from the light spilling through the open door. "That's what they said last time," she whispered, shrinking back. "Safe." Then they locked us in the box. Nathan knelt, his voice trembling but gentle. He pulled out his phone, showing her the footage from the gala just hours before. Vincent Hale, cuffed, screaming, dragged like a carcass past flashing cameras. "See him? That man can't hurt you anymore. Not ever again." The girl stared, her eyes widening, disbelief warring with hope. Slowly her tiny hand reached for his sleeve. For the first time she let someone guide her out. Behind Nathan, medical teams swarmed. Agents lifted children into waiting ambulances, wrapped them in blankets, pressed water bottles into trembling hands. The scene was organized chaos, but to Nathan, it was holy. This was what salvation looked like, not speech. Not contracts, but 20 heartbeats freed from steel walls. Brant stood apart, her face pale, tears tracking through her cracked facade. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years I looked away. Nathan turned, his voice ablaze. You looked away while they priced children like stocks. Don't think doing one right thing erases that. She dropped her gaze. For the first time, she didn't argue. Lucas approached, rifle slung, eyes scanning the perimeter. They'll try to cover this up, spin it, bury it under paperwork. Not this time, Nathan said, his voice steady, steel forged from sleepless nights. This time the whole world saw. Ava's words burned through the lies. Hale confessed on camera, and now 20 children stand as proof. They can't bury this. A commotion rose from the line of ambulances. Isla Johnson, face pale with grief and hope, stumbled out of a black SUV, scanning wildly. Then she saw them. Ava, standing on the step of one ambulance, Eli beside her, bruised but alive. The cry that tore from Isla's chest was part anguish, part miracle. She ran, arms opening, and her children collided with her like waves breaking against the shore. They clung, sobbing, a family made whole again. Ava pulled back just enough to meet Nathan's eyes. Her voice, raw but unshaken, carried across the chaos. You listened. That's why we won. Nathan swallowed the lump in his throat. For years, his victories had been measured in stock prices and acquisition headlines. Now they were measured in the fragile weight of children stepping into the light. As the sun finally broke through the fog, spilling gold over the harbor, Nathan knew his empire had changed forever. No boardroom triumph could match this. No quarterly report could rival the salvation of 20 small voices no longer silenced. And in that moment, as the dawn illuminated every scar, every tear, every heartbeat, Han Cole understood. This was not the end of the fight. It was the beginning.